What's up, everybody? Back on the Warm Weather Fans Sunbelt podcast. My name is Brian Stone. I am your host. As always, this week only joined by Matt Miguez. Zeke Palermo having some technical issues with his equipment. But we are here to talk about week one in the Sunbelt, everything that went wrong, everything that went right. I will say Zeke did send us his thoughts. Apparently, he did it in a form that was 11 words or fewer. So I have those and I can read them off if they're funny. I'm not going to read them if they're just like, hey, so and so looked good. But Matt, thank you for joining me this week. Thank you for not having computer issues. How's it going?
I'm doing fantastic. The only reason Zeke isn't here is because he sent us his thoughts and he is scared of the roasting that he would get by the both of us. Um, because some of the things he said, I love the guy to death, but some of the things he said were just absolutely off the rails. So we'll talk about that and a pretty exciting week around the Sun Belt in week one, and should be an even better week too.
So I had a question and I wanted to ask you this, and we can relate this to the Sun Belt, or we can just take it as a larger conversation wherever you kind of want to take it. But this is kind of a thing that I noticed in week one. Do you feel like a little bit that the FCS has closed the gap
Oh yeah.
between the FBS?
Oh yeah. I mean, look, I speaking for the Cajuns, I know it was a 40-10 game, and that sounds like a blowout, right? But man, Grambling was doing some nice things against the Cajuns. I was impressed with their offense. I thought their defense stepped up and made a couple of nice plays. I think the Cajuns just kind of overpowered them. Yeah, no, I certainly agree that I think the FCS has closed the talent gap. I mean, look at Jackson State with ULM. I talked about Grambling. You look elsewhere, Central Arkansas. We've now discovered that if it wasn't for a blown review, Central Arkansas would have won the game. So
Yeah.
like that's insane to think about. Yeah, I mean Lamar giving Texas State everything that they wanted, which is super concerning if you're GJ Kinney and company. We'll talk
Or your
about that.
name's or your name is Zeke Palermo.
Or your name is Zeke Palermo and you have them going 12-0 in the playoff. Um, so yeah, we got a lot to get to. Again, after an interesting week one.
All right. So after we got that out of the way, let's go ahead and transition into talking about the previous week's games. We're going to touch on each one a little bit. Some of them, there's not really that much to say. If App State killed East Tennessee State, like we saw that coming, it is
Correct.
what it is. Um, but we're going to touch on, I think, the most interesting ones that may have storylines that kind of reverberate throughout the rest of the season. So to start off with, Coastal Carolina last Thursday absolutely took Jacksonville State to the woodshed, 55-27. I tweeted this from the Warm Weather Fans account, and I fully believe this. Jacksonville State's got the worst quarterback situation in all of G5 football. I was checking the stats like throughout the game because I was watching. I was at an establishment and they had multiple TVs, and one of the TVs was Colorado and North Dakota State on this TV in front of me, which is what I was watching. But the Coastal Jacksonville State game was behind me, and I kept turning around and I was like, Coastal's on offense again. They had
Yeah.
the ball for 40 minutes of this game. And
Yeah.
so I don't want to say you throw this one out, but you're gonna be hard pressed to find teams that have quarterback situations worse than what Jacksonville State's dealing with right now.
Oh yeah, I mean it's certainly a problem. I mean they had a guy last year, I believe his name was Zion Turner, who was just fantastic. Right, led the offense, was a dual threat guy, was well respected by the locker room, and it showed on the field. And now Rich Rodriguez kind of had a lot of turnover, new new players across the board. Um, After that New Orleans Bowl win last year in their first season as an FBS member, and it showed, right? I mean, Coastal Carolina did whatever they wanted, dominated time of possession. Ethan Vasco looked almost a little too good.
What does
I'm
that mean?
not. I'm. It means that I'm cautiously buying it.
Okay.
It's one like he looked really good, right? But let's see if he does it again. It might have been a one-game wonder, but really impressed by Coastal's quarterback. The way that they were able to just score early and often on this Jacksonville State team. I mean, we're talking it was 41-10 going into the fourth. Like that is brutal. Um, and obviously Coastal puts the backups in. Jacksonville State's able to score a little bit. That makes things interesting. But in the end, it's still a 28-point win for Coastal. Really big week one statement on the road for Tim Beck's team.
If he keeps this up, I know you said you were cautiously buying in. If he keeps up what he's kind of started last year and has run through this year, Vasco's talking about top 5 quarterback territory in the Sun Belt.
Yep.
Like, I mean, again, 12 of 19, 249 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 pick, had 39 rushing yards and ran for a touchdown. I mean,
Yeah, he was impressive.
If he keeps this up when Sunbelt play starts, I mean, we're maybe talking about a borderline, top 5 quarterback in the conference. And based on the way some of the guys played that we like, that he might be even higher because, I know Zeke's not here, but we're going to talk about some of the teams that he's been down on and been up on, but I really like what I saw kind of last season in limited duty from Vasco. I thought he looked good Thursday against Jacksonville State. I know, anytime you have a game where the other team rolls out 2 quarterbacks and they combine for 14 of 27, 234 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 picks. I mean, that's a good week for you. But yeah, I mean, Jacksonville State offensively could do absolutely nothing outside of a long touchdown pass from Tyler Huff to Michael Petway. It was ugly. I mean, it was over very quickly, and it was just mostly, Coastal Carolina running the rock with their trio of running backs, taking time off the clock, owning the time of possession battle. They again, you can say whatever you want about Jacksonville State's quarterback situation. Coastal played good defense. I don't care.
Yep. No, I agree.
Anytime you're up 41-10, you're just firing on all cylinders. So good win for Tim Beck. Good win for the Chanticleers. I want to see how they stack up against Sunbelt competition because I feel like kind of what you said. Jacksonville State lost their quarterback who was talented from last year. Maybe this is a rebuilding year for Rich Rod and company, but I couldn't have
for sure.
If you were a fan of the team that plays on the teal turf, you couldn't have asked for a better start to the season than a 55-27 win on Thursday night. So,
yeah, no doubt. Like I said, really strong performance all the way around. That time of possession statistic is just insane. I mean, you held the ball for 2/3 of the game. That is nuts. So yeah, I agree with you 100% there. This is you couldn't have asked for much better if you're in Myrtle Beach.
yeah, and the trio of Simpkins, Lloyd, and Bennett, the running backs for Coastal, could be a real problem for opposing defenses coming up here in the future. We'll have to see how that all pans out. But yeah, great win for Coastal Carolina in the opener. 55-27. They moved to 1-0. Jacksonville State drops to 0-1. The other Thursday night game that we ran across, this was sort of expected. ULM defeats Jackson State 30-14. Once again, kind of the story of a team in ULM just owning the time of possession. They had the ball for 35 minutes in this one. I think we saw exactly what we were sort of all expecting with this new offense and Bryant Vincent running it. They ran the ball effectively. General Booty in a game where they pretty much dominated the time of possession. Only 14 pass attempts, just threw for 104 yards in this one. I guess you can look at it and say they did what they needed to do, but I think this is going to be the bread and butter of this team for a couple years to come. as long as Vincent's there, is they're going to run the ball. They're going to want to own the time of possession and keep the opposing offense off the field. So what did you kind of take
Yeah.
away from this one?
I mean, kind of the same. I was really impressed by Ahmad Hardy. A really strong performance in his collegiate debut. Took good care of the football, like you said, with the time of possession. Really kind of controlled the pace. But one thing that kind of sticks out is this game was probably closer than many people thought going into the fourth quarter. I mean, it was a 21-14 game after three quarters. Now I know ULM. Some people would argue that they're the worst FBS team in America, but you still don't want to lose to an FCS program.
No.
So, I mean, only being up 7 points at home against an FCS school that lost everything when Dion left, it's not a great look. But they were able to rebound, score the final 9 points of the game, and pick up a pretty crucial 30-14 win to open the season.
Yeah, I think, and there's not a lot to say about this game, but I'm going to kind of put a button on it with this. It's fine if you're ULM and Bryant Vincent and you decide, hey, we're going to run this offense where everything runs through Hardy or whoever, is the leading rusher that week. It's a lot different when you're playing from behind or you're in a competitive game and you're not just able to kind of overpower your opponent. So
Certainly.
when they break into play against a team that's of equal or greater skill than they are, especially at this stage in the rebuilding cycle for ULM, it's going to be very interesting to see what the offense really looks like when they're able to when they have to open it up. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
when it's not,
for sure.
it's not optional for them to just run the ball and take time off the clock. Like if Booty has to make throws when it matters in tight windows, what does that look like? So that's going to be something that remains to be seen at this point. Just because they simply overpowered a Jackson State team that didn't, they hung around, but clearly they didn't have the gas to go all the way. But UL Monroe moves to 1-0 with the win. Jackson State drops to 0-1. So I'm just taking these games in the order that they're presented on ESPN. So Saturday, let's talk about, and I mean, I can do the majority of the talking. You can chip in or ask if you want. Let's talk about Georgia Southern and Boise State. So I think the most important thing here that Georgia Southern covered the 13-point spread at home. I think we can all agree on that. Do not pay attention to the fact that Austin Janty almost ran for 300 yards solo. And the Eagles defense looked like it was playing against a Make-A-Wish kid, and they were just escorting him to the end zone. Don't think about that. That's not important here. What's important is they covered the spread.
He scored 6 tutties. Cue the LeBron James video. Not 1, not 2, not 3. Oh my God. Look, shout out to the Eagles because they did their part in my 14-leg parlay. Okay. I went wild. I had this bonus bet, made a 14-leg parlay. I was like, all right, let's just see what happens. 13 of the 14 legs hit.
Oh man. Which one?
Sunbelt Billy over there in the swamp let me down.
That game was over 8 minutes in.
I took Florida on the money line. I was like, look, it's a 3-point spread. They're at home. The swamp's going to make up for those 3 points. They're going to find a way to win.
No.
Billy Napier, if you're listening to this, you owe me $300. Just kidding. But we'll move on.
Can I just say something really quick? And you may think
ahead.
I'm crazy for saying this. I think this is Clay Helton's last year at Georgia Southern.
Oh.
I think he's going to be done after this year. Like it's not just this game, it's the 2 years that preceded it. It's one of the linebackers coming out in a press conference after the game and saying that guys were missing or late for meetings defensively leading up to this game. Like, it just seems like a general lack of institutional control, and I think that things are going to get worse before they get better. And run defense aside, we'll talk about them playing Nevada this week, but I it just seems like a top down institutional issue that isn't going to be solved until they get somebody in the head coaching spot that the players can actually respect and maybe even fear a little bit. Because if you are a player at the FBS level and you feel emboldened enough to miss meetings and you just feel like what are they going to do? They need me on Saturday. And the coach is basically like, yeah, that it's not going to work. The second that happens, everything's out the window. So they might win a couple games this year, but between the run defense and the way that looked and everything else that seems to be kind of conspiring around Clay Helton, I think he's done after the season. I think they're going to win like 5 or 6 games.
But let me ask you this. Is Ashton Jeanty running for 267 yards because Georgia Southern's run defense is that bad? Or maybe he's that good?
Yes.
Like, let me play devil's advocate there for a second. Are you saying it's both?
It's both. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't care. You don't get to almost 300 yards rushing solo just by being a great player. Like, there has to be a real issue on the defensive side of the ball for that to happen. Like that, and apparently there was I heard this secondhand, so you can take anybody who's listening can take this with a grain of salt. Apparently there was somebody who was doing film study from our game on Saturday and said that out of the 66 plays that Boise ran or some number along those lines, Georgia Southern had run defenders that were out of position for 17 of them. So, and here's the thing too. Here's also the thing for people who don't follow the program. He's already on his second defensive coordinator.
Yeah.
The first one was fired after year 1. And Brandon Bailey was brought in before last year. But the thing that was taking all the heat off of Brandon Bailey was how bad Davis Brin was. So you could sit there and say, yeah, the defense isn't great, but you got a guy on the opposite side of the ball leading the country in interceptions. What do you expect the defense to do? They're in bad spots all the time. And now, JC French went out there and didn't turn the ball over once. Or sorry.
He looked good.
I think he fumbled. So I take that back. I think he had one fumble when he was running.
But that's gonna happen.
Right. Yeah, but what I'm saying is you are in this game. 6:48 left in the third quarter. Jalen White punches in a 1-yard touchdown run. You take a 30-28 lead over Boise at home. You would think, hey, home opener, sold out stadium. We've got the lead finally for the first time all game. Let's make them pay. The next play from scrimmage for Boise, or sorry, not the next play, but 5 minutes later, Boise marches down the field, 14 plays, 75 yards. Jeanty scores his 5th touchdown of the day, and it's over from there. And I'm sorry to Clay Helton or Brandon Bailey or whoever, you cannot score 45 points in a game on offense and lose by double digits and keep your job. That's just not how football works. Like, if you've scored 45,
Brian, I'm gonna take it a step further for you. You talked about Jeanty scoring his 5th touchdown. How about Georgia Southern responding to open the 4th quarter with a 5-play, 75-yard touchdown drive to take the lead again? And then the very next play from scrimmage, Ashton Jeanty runs 74 5 yards for his
Untouched.
6th touchdown of the day.
Untouched. Totally untouched.
That's
Like,
where you lost.
If you watch the replay too, he started to go up the middle, he bounced it out to the left side, and no one was within 10 yards of him after that point. Like, it looked like a defense that was malfunctioning on College Football 25. Like,
oh, and here's the other question I have. I understand that Georgia Southern was down 14-0.
mm-hmm.
Totally get that. When you score a touchdown with 13:28 left in the second quarter, why are you going for 2? Walk me through the rationale there.
Well, you and I talked about this a while ago, and typically this is reserved for late game situations. But if you're down 2 scores, you're down 14, you go for 2, you get it. You're down 6 at that point. If you're not, you're only down 8, which is still a 1-score game. Now, usually, common sense would dictate we do that in late game situations when we need multiple scores. But this team isn't run in any conventional way that a football coach would look at and go, yeah, that's a well-run team. So I don't really know what to say. Like, it's an average football team with a school and a city that wants them to be above average, and Clay Helton just cannot bring himself to be above average. He's an average football coach, nice guy, that's fine, except your problem is your players don't respect you and you guys can't stop the run. So what are we to do? Are we keeping him employed just to keep him employed at that point? I mean, that's my question. So, well, but that's fine. But if the AD, Jared Benko, wants to kill all fan enthusiasm and have empty stadiums every Saturday, go for it. Keep him employed in perpetuity. Let him retire there. Now, you're going to close out his career with no one in the stands, and you're going to totally kill any momentum the football program has ever had. But yeah, if you just want to keep the guy employed, go for it. Who cares? So, I mean, all right. So that's out of the way. I will say J.C. French, again, did a much better job of taking care of the football than Davis Brin ever did. He wasn't super efficient throwing the football. 28 of 50, 322 yards, 2 touchdowns. Also ran for 39 yards and a score. I think they've got a nice little quarterback on their hands. Like, I don't think he's ever going to be a Grayson McCall, Jordan McLeod type, but he can be the type of player that you can win games with and can make some plays.
Yeah, I was very impressed with the little that I saw of this game.
And I just think if you're gonna consistently field one of the worst run defenses in the history of college football, then everybody on the offensive side who contributes might as well transfer out, because it doesn't matter. Like, you can score as many points as you want to. If the defense is just going to escort a guy to the end zone every time they get the ball, like, why are we even here? So yeah, I don't know, not much more to say than that. I mean, I've pretty much said everything that I feel. I think this is the beginning of the doomsday clock of Clay Helton at Georgia Southern. How many coaches have you ever seen start their time with a school 500 or worse for 2 years and then all of a sudden figure it out in year 3 or year 4? Like, never. Like, it usually, you start to see some sort of fruit like come off the tree of, hey, we've been putting time into this. I've been recruiting. I have all of my guys now. The classes and the transfer portal and all that stuff is mine. Lunsford's guys are totally pretty much out of there, except the guys that have been hanging around for a while. But this is totally on Hilton at this point. He hired everybody. Yep. He got all these players, and it's not working. So, but yeah, with that, Georgia Southern drops to 0-1. Boise State moves to 1-0. This will be a quick one. App State beats East Tennessee State 38-10. No surprise. Joey Aguilar was sharp, 326, 2 touchdowns. I I don't know. Again, we saw this coming. If there was more to talk about in this game, I would try to bring something else up, but they were an outmatched FCS school. So like what did we
Yeah.
expect?
No, I mean I agree with you. App State did exactly what they were supposed to do. They took care of business early. They took care of business often. Joey Aguilar looked really, really solid in this game, and now they get to kind of flip their script a little bit. Looking ahead, they've got Clemson on Saturday, and say what you want about Clemson, but they didn't look great on Saturday against Georgia. Just
Yeah.
saying.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
Yep. All right. So App moves to 1-0 with the win there. East Tennessee State drops to 0-1. So, sorry, App fans, that we're just not gonna go deep into this. Like it's one thing when an FCS school keeps it closer than it should have been. Then we have something to talk about. But you guys routing an FCS school was, I mean, it was almost like a
Yeah,
scheduled
that's
win. So, all right. So
well.
let's get into the next game here. Old Dominion takes South Carolina to the wire and loses by 4 as a 3-touchdown dog. I told you guys, and I know you guys believed me, but I've my dad is a South Carolina fan. I grew up cheering for South Carolina just because I was from there. My dad went to school there. They do this. Like they do not beat anybody easy. It doesn't matter how bad the team they play is. They do not blow anybody out. They make everything look as hard as humanly possible. And I do want to give credit. Old Dominion did go out and do it. Grant Wilson played okay, uh, 2 picks, but you play an SEC school, that's kind of to be expected. But yeah, I mean, Old Dominion, good performance against a P4, P5, P4 opponent. So yeah, what did you take away from this one?
You went on the road to a Atlantic Coast region opponent, right? An SEC program in front of 80,000 people. You were a 3-touchdown dog. You turned the ball over 4 times and only lost by 4. Look,
Yep.
Brian, I am not a fan of moral victories. I'm not. But if you're Ricky Ronnie, you've got to be looking at this tape going like, man, if we can clean those little things up, we're going to be fine. We're going to be fine. You went to Williams-Brice, which talk to anybody in the SEC. That's not an easy place to go win. That's not an easy place to play. You turned the ball over 4 times and you only lost by 4. You took them to the limit. I mean, that's got to give you some kind of confidence when you go play in your conference, which I'm not saying that it's weak competition, but compared to South Carolina, they're not on the same level, right? So yeah, I mean, if you can clean up those turnovers and those little mental mistakes, I think Old Dominion put together a really nice showing on Saturday against the Gamecocks.
I think more importantly too, for the Monarchs specifically, I think they may have found a true receiver that can contribute.
Yeah,
And that had been the knock on them the last couple years is no matter who was back there, Grant Wilson or anybody else, there was never a guy that scared an opposing defense. It was just sort of like, hey, they've got a bunch of guys. A couple of years ago when Blake Watson, ran all over Coastal, that was nice. But there was never any consistency in who was going to perform week to week. If Isaiah Page goes out and performs each week, then maybe we've got a nice little offense cooking here. And yeah, you do need to cut down on the turnovers. One other thing too, though, for Old Dominion's defense, I don't think you're going to find or play quarterbacks very often that are completing fewer than 50% of their passes and still get to play a full 60 minutes. You know what I mean?
Correct.
Like at the very worst, you know, I'm trying to think like JC French, Aguilar, McLeod, like all of the Vasco, all of these guys, they're not going to complete sub 50% of their passes. They're just not.
For sure.
So that I don't think that's something you can bank on, but I do think that if you identify a number one receiver, you can build off of that rapport with him and Grant Wilson with Page. And I think this is definitely something to build off of. I think there's a couple of caveats. Like I said, you're not going to play a team that refuses to pull a quarterback that can't complete 50% of his passes very often. But again, great performance by them, even though they lost by 4 points. I mean, I think Shane Beamer is a little bit like the Clay Helton of the SEC, where it's like,
Yeah.
listen, man, it's been underperformance after underperformance every year, and we're supposedly doing all this great recruiting. We haven't seen it yet. It doesn't
Right.
show up on Saturdays, so we need to figure it out. But yeah, good performance by Old Dominion. South Carolina moves to 1-0 with the win. Old Dominion drops to 0-1 with the loss. Another one that was strange to me, and I'll explain why. So Marshall beat Stony Brook 45-3. That wasn't the strange part. The strange part to me was apparently they are just running anybody and everybody out at quarterback. So Cole Pennington, who we assumed would start, did not. It was somebody named Stone Earl that got the start. I'm not familiar with his work previously. He played fairly well. Braylon Braxton got in the game late. Cole Pennington got a few snaps through a touchdown. But I'm sorry, Marshall, you're not going to be able to do this every single week. Like
No.
we can't play quarterback carousel every single week. It's not going to work.
So Stone Earl started his career at Abilene Christian for 2 years, and then he spent the last 2 years at North Texas. So he is a fifth-year senior that transferred into Marshall. He's 6 foot, 211 pounds. He had 99 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. Braylon Braxton had a nice game as well with 2 touchdowns. But look, I think that this was a really good opportunity against a team that, well, let's be honest, you knew you were going to beat. To kind of give three quarterbacks the opportunity to show what they could do, right? And if I am Charles Huff, I'm looking at Braylon Braxton and going, "You got the job next week."
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you go based, I mean, he was fantastic. 7 of 11, 141 yards, 2 touchdowns, added 20 yards on the ground. I mean, he was the best quarterback out of the three. Now, if you want to look at rushing stats as well, Stone Earl also added 55 yards on the ground, but he only threw for 97. So I think maybe you could look at a two quarterback system, kind of like UL did a few years back, where you have a starter play 3 series, and then you give the second guy 1 series,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of get in that rhythm where okay, every fourth series this kid's going in, and maybe try that. But I was more impressed with from watching the highlights. At least I was more impressed from Braylon Braxton than I was from Stone Earl.
I totally agree. If Braxton doesn't start from here on out, there's Charles Huff needs his head checked, personally.
Yeah,
Just
no, you're not
because,
wrong.
I mean, we saw it last year. Pennington is not good. I mean, I'm sorry. Like, unless he's taken giant steps in spring and fall practice, and based on the fact that he was the third quarterback that got rolled out there, that doesn't seem to be the case. Unless he's taken giant strides and we're just not aware of it, he's cooked. Stone Earl was fine. but I think Braylon Braxton gives you the best chance to win of these three guys. So
I agree.
again, you said it, but it's like, yeah, it in my mind, it's his job until he just loses it. I will say they also identified a pretty good running back in AJ Turner. I know that he had one long, 80-yard run, but 8 carries, 119 yards. Maybe just something to build off of. I mean, they desperately need a running game following, Rasheen Ali's departure. So we'll kind of see how that goes. And, Christian Fitzpatrick also 4 catches, 97 yards, a touchdown. Elijah Metcalf caught two touchdowns. Maybe you've got a couple of little weapons. Now, I will say you're not going to play Stony Brook every week, but
No,
there might be something to build off of here. So
for sure.
we'll see how that all pans out. Marshall moves to 1-0 this season. Stony Brook is now 0-1. Talking about another Sunbelt team that just did not show up really. South Alabama loses to North Texas 52-38. Any signs of Kane Womack's defense still being there? That's out the window. That's not happening. That's canceled. That's done. Chandler Morris, I think you said last week he was a TCU transfer. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Chandler Morris shredded them. 415 yards passing, 3 touchdowns, 32 of 41. And then who is this receiver? Ward for them? Just
12
absolutely. Catches. Damon Ward Jr., 12 catches, 230, and 2 scores. So I didn't really doubt that it might be a real step back season in Mobile, but it looks like Gio Lopez can play. But if the defense, it's a little bit like Southern. If the defense isn't going to come to play, then what are we even doing out here?
Correct. 100%.
So what did you see in this one?
I mean, look, like you said about Gio Lopez, I think the offense did some good things. He threw for 432 yards and 3 touchdowns, added 62 carries, 62 yards, and a score on the ground as well. But look, you had a lead at halftime. If I'm not mistaken, South Alabama got the ball to start the second half.
And you got outscored 28-7 in the third quarter alone.
Yeah, that's not great. Yeah, you got the ball to start the second half because the first score came at the 13:23 mark of the third quarter, and their drive was only 47 seconds long. So if you do the math, South Alabama held the ball for the first 50 seconds of the quarter.
Mm-hmm.
So you started the second half with the ball and the lead and proceeded to get outscored 28-7. Like, that's just, and against a team that you're not playing an SEC school. This is North Texas. This is a level playing field opponent. Trying to get it to where you're playing
comparable competition.
Yeah, exactly. And you let them come into your house and, for lack of better words, spank you. They beat you up. This is not a great look for South Alabama. Really bad loss at home. I know their next 2 games are pretty easy at Ohio, and then Northwestern State comes to town. That's great. You're going to be 2-1, and you're going to be feeling really high on yourself. But then you go to Kid Brewer and to Death Valley. The real Death Valley, by the way. Shout out to our South Carolina brethren. LSU is the real Death Valley. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Anybody wants to argue with me, bring it on. South Alabama is going to get murdered by both App State and LSU. Murdered.
I agree. Because if you can't,
not great.
If you can't stop anybody, then why would we be afraid to play you? Like, yes, they will get killed by LSU, and that would have happened in South Alabama's, 2022 season when they won 10 games. Like,
Correct.
It was going to happen regardless. But The team takes a step back, underachieves last year. You lose a ton of production
including
this
your head
year,
coach.
including your head coach, who was a defensive-minded guy, and maybe been the only one who is keeping this thing together. And so you promote your OC to head coach, and
Who doesn't have a great track record as a head coach.
right, and you allow 550 yards. I know South Alabama actually had more yardage, but it was 42-26 going into the fourth quarter. It didn't really matter. Like, South Alabama had to have yardage. 0 turnovers forced. They just don't have the difference makers on the defensive side of the ball to make an impact.
Right.
So until that happens, I mean, this is probably going to be a long year for the Jaguars. On the plus side, Jamal Pritchett played pretty well. 197 yards and a touchdown. On the not plus side, on the minus point, you struggled to run the football. You essentially don't have a running back on this roster. Like, there's no LaDamian Webb anymore.
No.
Your leading rusher, other than Gio Lopez, who had 62 yards, was all-name team running back Fluff Botwell. I don't know if you saw that. Fluff.
I did not see that.
Okay.
Fluff Botwell. There he is.
He
6 carries for 30 yards.
Fluff Botwell was the second leading rusher on the team and had 6 carries for 30 yards.
He's a 5'10", 219-pound freshman from
he couldn't be
Wanatha, Alabama.
If he was Derrick Henry size, no one would have ever called him Fluff.
I guess that's fair. I guess that's a good point. Hey, how about this guy, Bishop Davenport? That's a solid name.
That name sounds like he says, "Do you know who my dad is?" when he gets pulled over by the cops.
Don't you know who I am?
Don't you know who I am? My father will hear about this. Anyway. Yeah, so bad showing by South Alabama. They are now 0-1. North Texas is now 1-0. Okay, so I haven't read any of Zeke's little musings up to this point, but I want to point this out so that when we get to the Texas State thing, I can point it out again. Okay, so Arkansas State gets taken down to the wire by Central Arkansas. You talked about the blown review. It was the reason they won. Mm-hmm. Zeke's contribution for this game was "told you so." However, he didn't say the same thing about Texas State playing Lamar. So we'll talk about that when we get to it. But yeah, not a good start to the season for Butch Jones, who we talked about it. If they underachieve this season with Jalen Rayner, it might be time to look for a house elsewhere, Mr. Jones, because, brother, if you can't get it done, what is this, year 4 for him? If you can't get it done in year 4 with the reigning freshman of the year at quarterback, it might be time for the Red Wolves to move on. Hey, you know who else? You know who is out there and available to coach? Blake Anderson.
I knew you were going to say that.
I'm just saying.
Look, here's the thing. We're talking about Jalen Rayner, and I agree. Jalen Rayner is a great player. However, he had a great game. I know everybody's going, he threw for 317 yards. He barely completed 50% of his passes. He only threw 1 touchdown and had 1 pick. He didn't play well. The defense for Arkansas State did not play well, as Shunderick Powell ran for 12 yards a carry and 2 scores on you. Oh, he's an FCS running back. Look,
so you're saying it's fine if they play for Boise State, but not Central Arkansas?
Certainly. Certainly it is. Because here's the thing. And look, I'm not going to knock anybody that plays in an FCS program, because I never played college football. I never played anything in college, to be fair. So they're better athletes than me. I'm not knocking them. However, on the totem pole, a Central Arkansas running back is here, and an Arkansas State defense is here. You are better. You should not be getting pushed around by an FCS running back. Plain and simple. So the run defense didn't play well for Arkansas State. Jalen Rayner could have been better. And honestly, if you don't give up 21 unanswered points in the fourth quarter,
Yeah.
There's the game right there.
Right.
Say that 21 points is only 7. You win 34-17, nobody's worried about it.
Yeah, I agree.
No one's worried about it. The defense for Arkansas State has to be better. If they can be, and we talked about that going into the season. Their defense was a question mark last year. That's why they weren't better last year than they were. If their defense can get better, they are going to be fine. Their offense is just, it's too talented. Jalen Rayner, Jaquez Cross, Corey Rucker. Their offense is way too talented. If their defense is better, they'll be fine. But if their defense struggles throughout the rest of the season, like they did in week 1, which I'm chalking it up to week 1 jitters, week 1 rust, whatever you want to call it. But if they're not better, then Zeke's right. Arkansas State's going to be in a lot of trouble.
Well, I'll say this. So obviously it wasn't a good start for the defense, right? I mean, you give up, 432 yards of offense to a FCS school. We had all of these concerns coming into the season that this was a possibility, that the defense hadn't actually taken a step forward, wasn't going to take a step forward. And yeah, this kind of proved all of those concerns to be correct. So I just don't really know what to make of this Arkansas State team. I think if this keeps up and they just decide not to play defense or physically are unable to play defense, I think Butch Jones is out of there after the season, because they're going to end up losing a lot of games that they have no business losing with the talent that they have on offense. So, yeah, I mean, if you run this effort out against Louisiana, Texas State, App State, a lot of the just teams in general that are good to middling, even down to the Georgia Southerns of the world. I don't think they play Georgia Southern, but even still, I'm just kind of making a point. These other teams are not gonna find a way to fail the way that Central Arkansas did. So that's something that they're going to need to shape up right away. But I kind of agree with what Zeke said last week. Now, having seen the defense, I think they're closer to getting Butch Jones fired than they are saving his job at this stage. So
yeah,
unless things change in the next couple weeks, like, it's going to be a rough season, because every game's going to be a shootout. They're going to have to put everything on Rucker and Cross and Rayner's shoulders and be like, hey guys, you're going to have to win us every single game, because we just can't play defense. And yeah, so it's going to be tough. Like, they've really got their work cut out for them this year. So Arkansas State wins 34-31. They move to 1-0 this season. Central Arkansas drops to 0-1. Another team that had been very good over the last couple of years, Troy, finds a way to lose 28-26 to Nevada, now making me, a Georgia Southern fan, very nervous about next Saturday's game against Nevada. Because the one thing Nevada does is run the football. Well, guess what? Guess what Georgia Southern can't defend against?
The run.
So there you go. Goose Crowder played okay. 20 of 30, 200 yards and a touchdown. I mean, that's like Alex Smith's career stat line per game there. I mean, that is as average as it gets. No offense. That's not a Gunnar Watson stat line. Let's just say that. Damian Taylor, 11 carries, 103 and a touchdown. He played pretty well. But defensively, Troy gave up 393 yards of offense to Nevada. They didn't force a single turnover. Nevada won this game and had 16 first downs the entire game. They almost doubled their score was almost double the amount of first downs that they got in this game. So, yeah, I mean, we talked about it, and we all universally kind of agreed that Troy was going to take a step back from where they had been. But now I feel a little bit even more justified in taking their season total under, because I just don't I don't feel like they have the horses to play with a lot of these teams. So it's going to be Gerard Parker's got a building project in front of him.
The thing that's concerning to me is when you look at the way that this game unfolded. Troy jumps out to a 14-0 lead with 3 minutes left in the first half. They give up a late touchdown right before the half, but you're still up 14-6. Things seem like they're going to be okay. Nevada opens the second half going 75 yards in a minute to tie the game. And again, that's concerning, but that's not the end all be all, right? There's still plenty of football left to play. There's 14 minutes left in the third quarter. And then this next drive is where things kind of unraveled for me. 13 plays, 69 yards. So you moved the ball down the field, settled for a field goal. Later in the fourth, 13 plays, 74 yards, settled for a field goal. Those drives where you're moving the ball down the field against your opponent, those are the drives that you have to get 6 or 7 and not 3. Again, obviously, if ifs and buts were candy and nuts, we'd all have a Merry Christmas, right? But you take one of those field goals and turn them into touchdowns, you win the game. You win the game.
Not only that, but this game was very un-Troy-like as to what we had kind of come to expect under John Summerall. Like, I know the personnel is not the same, but I kind of said this in the season preview. The days of them holding teams to 2 touchdowns every week is done for the foreseeable future. Like, that was a very nice period of Troy football. However, those days are out the window, as is Gunnar Watson and Kamani Vidal and, Carlton Marshall and everybody else that was a part of that 2-year stretch. So now you have to go back and reckon and say, hey, our expectations, we need to temper them. This is year 1 of a new coach. But I also think, given his offensive background and given the last time they hired a P5 offensive coordinator as a head coach, I think a little bit, and I know it's just game 1, but I think a little bit in the back of Troy fans' minds, they're a little bit like, oh no, is this Chip Lindsey part 2? So
and that's a valid concern to have, right?
I think so.
Is it early? Sure, but I mean, Chip Lindsey gave this fan base nightmares. So I can understand their thought process of, oh God, here we go again. I mean, that's warranted.
Yeah. The guys that we didn't call out, Savion Red, the running back for Nevada, 11 carries, 135 yards. Troy's top receiver, Devontae Ross, 7 catches, 102 and a score, caught Goose Crowder's only touchdown. I think I've come to realize, I said this the other day, Saturday, when I was sitting next to my wife on the couch and we were watching Notre Dame, Texas A&M. And I turned to her and I said, I cannot remember the last time I was impressed with a Notre Dame offense. And Gerard Parker, coming from that background, now makes me think, wait, why'd they hire this guy? Because he coached at Notre Dame? Was that because think about it. They've long had a very good defense. They've had a number of guys cycle through that team. They put out one offensive contributor to the NFL like every 2 or 3 seasons.
Correct.
And that's it. Like one guy. It'll be like, hey, we got Michael Mayer. Or hey, we've got Tyler Eifert like a million years ago. Right. But by and large, you're just kind of like, okay. Like none of this scares me. None of the offense surprises me. There's nothing in here that you wouldn't find in a million other playbooks. And I think that's where the concern needs to come from. And the fact that the defense has taken a step back, obviously, with the amount of talent they lost. So, Javon Solomon's not walking through that door. So,
unfortunately, for them at least.
Yeah. With the loss, Troy drops to 0-1. Nevada is now 1-1 this season. Another one that we don't have to talk about too long, but I thought the circumstances around this game were funny. I don't know if you were aware of this. So, a couple of things about the Southern Miss Kentucky game. Number one, Kentucky almost didn't cover the spread because they ended the game in an abrupt fashion due to the weather. That was number one. Number two, the game was supposed to kick off at like 7:30 Eastern time. It didn't kick off till 9:45. Yeah, it didn't kick off till 9:45. Number three, the lightning and weather was so bad that for a lot of the camera operators, they did not have people that were working the cameras because they were afraid for their safety. So the shot of the stadium is like all 22 footage for the entirety of the game.
That's fantastic.
So it was someone who I does a podcast I listen to is a Kentucky fan, and he was like, I was watching the game from the Goodyear blimp was the visual that they had for this game. They were like the Hubble telescope was broadcasting it. But yeah, I mean, this went exactly how we thought it would. Kentucky just ran all over Southern Miss. Southern Miss has no offense. I mean, just none. Like there's nothing here that scares you. We talked about it last week when we power ranked our coaches that we thought were in the most trouble. Will Hall, I think, is on the way out faster than anybody else in the Sun Belt. I think he's already got his plane ticket booked for like mid-October. I was incorrect. They didn't even play a fourth quarter. They played 3 quarters of football and just called it.
Correct.
So, do you have anything to say about this game? Because that was all I had to say. I thought it was funny, the circumstances around it.
Will Hall better start packing his bags.
Yep.
I mean, I hate to be so, harsh and abrupt about it, but obviously they played a SEC program, but we're sitting here and there is no even remote inkling of this team getting better.
No.
I mean, Tate Rodemaker, 13 of 19, 126 yards, no touchdowns, 2 picks. Okay, it was raining. You're playing an SEC team. Quarterback can have a bad game, right? Whatever. Let's go to the running game, because the running game always does better in the rain, doesn't it? How about Ethan Crawford, your backup quarterback, 3 carries for 10 yards. Keon Clay, 1 carry for 7 yards. Rodriguez Clark, you ready for this one? You ready for this stat line? 6 carries, 3 yards.
A massive performance.
They averaged 0.4 yards per carry as a team.
Yep.
If he doesn't beat Southeastern Louisiana by 3 scores,
three scores is a lot to ask for this team.
I know, but like, oh, what a rough time to be in Hattiesburg.
Yep, I totally agree.
That's all I'm
with the loss, Southern Miss is now 0-1. Kentucky is now 1-0. Another game that we didn't have to talk a lot about just because we knew the way that it was headed and it went that exact same way. Georgia Tech beats Georgia State 35-12. We got to see the debut of Christian Valou. He was fine, but Georgia State's so overmatched against a team of Georgia Tech's caliber that they couldn't get anything going on the ground. I think this is a no-duh statement by me, but I feel like it needs to be said anyway. I think Darren Granger's ability to scramble is going to be sorely missed by this team. Agreed. Because it opened up so much so many other running lanes. It kept defenses on its toes, and Christian Valu just doesn't project as that type of player. We talked about it. I mean, the three worst teams in the Sun Belt this year are going to be ULM, Georgia State, Southern Miss. So none of this really surprised me. They struggled to move the football, which wasn't a shock. I think the only surprise that I had was that Georgia Tech didn't beat them by a larger margin.
Correct. Yeah, Georgia Tech's really impressive. I mean, Haynes King, 275 yards, 2 touchdowns. He did have the 1 pick. Haynes ran the ball really well, 84 yards to the score. Like you said, you hit the nail on the head that this game went exactly the way that we thought it would, and we'll see if Georgia State can bounce back next week.
So with that, Georgia State moves to 0-1 this season. Georgia Tech is now 2-0 after beating Georgia State and Florida State in back-to-back weeks. The next game here, you watched Louisiana play Grambling. Do you want to give me some brief thoughts? Because I'm going to be totally honest, I didn't watch a second of this game, but you go ahead.
Oh, you missed a doozy. Look, I think the Cajuns played really well. The first play of the game, I thought that they were very aggressive. Little play action. Ben Woldridge finds Harvey Broussard over the middle for a 50-yard pass play. Was able to cap that drive off with a touchdown. You responded with some good defense to end the first quarter. Early in the second, you find Harvey Broussard in the back of the end zone again, 14-0. Immediately follow that up with a pick six, and then immediately follow that up with a 56-yard touchdown, which I'm not really sure what happened on that Tavion Smith touchdown. Kind of looked like Moses parted the Red Sea. Grambling's defenders went this way, and Tavion Smith went this way.
Yep.
Not quite sure what happened, but Tavion Smith was just kind of standing there in the flat like, hey, Ben, right here, bud. I'm gonna catch it. I promise you. I'm not gonna miss it. And so it was just one of those things. It was 37-0. 6 minutes into the into the third quarter, and that's when the backups kind of came in. You traded field goals in the fourth. Look, Cajuns got 480 yards of total offense, only gave up 240, 24 first downs, dominated the time of possession. It was an all-around really strong performance. Ben Woldridge was, read the stat line. He was phenomenal. 25 of 33, 308 yards, 3 touchdowns. He had a pick, but, if you go back and watch the tape, it wasn't really his fault. He threw it slightly behind his receiver, but his both hands on it. So that, you gotta find a way to make that catch. The ball gets deflected. It ends up in the hands of a Grambling defender. So look, it is what it is. I thought Zylan Perry had some nice flashes in the run game. That's the biggest concern for me from this game. The Cajuns didn't run the ball very well. And against a SWAC school, I was kind of hoping you would run the ball a little bit better than that. 118 yards as a team and 28 attempts. You were well disciplined, only 1 penalty, and it was a false start penalty pretty early in the game, if I remember correctly. But again, took care of the football, was efficient on third down, all around good performance in week 1.
So with that, Louisiana moves to 1-0 this season. Grambling moves to 0-1. Let's go ahead and get to this next game here. James Madison beats Charlotte 30-7. Alonzo Barnett gets the start over Dylan Morris, the Washington transfer. Barnett looked pretty good, 10 of 18, 219 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 pick. Also ran for 89 yards, was the team's leading rusher. I think the area of concern for James Madison has to be a little bit kind of what you said about Louisiana, the inability to run the ball with anybody else outside of Barnett. If Ayo Adeyi or George Petaway or one of these guys can't handle the rushing load, I think asking Barnett to do everything is a bad outcome.
Oh, for sure. Certainly.
I think that's going to come back to bite you more times often than not. Now, again, Charlotte's not very good, so I thought they played fairly well, and all things considered. And Barnett really rebounded from getting pulled in game 1 of last season. But I don't think that this is not something that you can count on every single week. This is not a game plan of Barnett needs to lead the team in rushing and passing and all of the above. That's just not going to fly. And I understand
For
how
sure.
much talent they lost, but we've seen him play before, and I know he's probably gotten better, but he's just not going to be able to do this every week against Sunbelt teams.
No, I agree 100%. They're going to have to figure out how to run the ball better as their season goes on, kind of like I mentioned with the Cajuns. But Barnett had a good performance when you needed it, and good strong win in year 1 for Bob Chesney.
So with that, James Madison moves to 1-0 this season. Charlotte drops to 0-1. So yeah, this is a game that I would like Zeke to be here for. I would like Zeke to have been here for this, because I would have liked to have seen more than just one sentence of I couldn't even make heads or tails of what he sent me on this game specifically. He said something along the lines of, it's either a one game one off or they're as soft as Southern. And I'm like, well, it's got to be one or the other. Like you gotta make a stand one way or the other. You can't just be like, I don't know, and then be like, told you so, Arkansas State. Like that's not how this works.
Look, what's concerning for me, and as someone who admittedly didn't watch this game because they played at the same time as the Cajuns, it's 18-0 at halftime, and so you're like, okay, well, this is
Over.
what we expected, right? Texas State playing a lower level opponent, showing their muscle, blah blah blah. No, nope, not quite. 21-10 going into the fourth. Lamar outscores you in the fourth quarter 17-13. Outscored you for the second half 27-16. To make things really, really interesting down the stretch. Look, one game, one offs, they're a thing. I'm not gonna say that this is, oh my God, the sky is falling in San Marcos, but this is certainly not great for a team that not only are very Palermo, but national pundits have picked Texas State to be the G5 rep in the playoff.
Brett McMurphy.
This is not a great start to that, because again, you're gonna have to win out to be the G5 team in the playoff, and the only way that you can get in without winning out is if nobody else wins out.
Right.
If you go 11-1, but Liberty takes their cupcake schedule and goes 13-0, Liberty's in.
Yep.
So, that's with a schedule of, UTSA, you go to Arizona State, Troy, Arkansas State, Louisiana, on and on and on. If you struggled to beat Lamar, I mean, that's concerning.
So, also, I grabbed my mic for emphasis on this. So much for all the disrespect that they were getting from us before this. You know what I mean? Like, Zeke in Bobcats Den, love you. Thank you for listening to the show so much. You guys crowing about the disrespect that Texas State was getting by us me and Matt not picking them to make the college football playoff and then coming out and barely beating an FCS school. I mean, yes, it was a 10-point game with 4 minutes to go. But on the other hand, it was a 10-point game with 4 minutes to go in a game that you were up 18-0 at halftime. The reason I didn't watch this game was because I looked at the score at halftime and went, "Oh, cool, I don't have to watch that." And I just cut it off, like I cut another game on.
And I don't. Here's the other statistic that I told forgot two. Penalties. Did you see the penalties?
Yeah.
Texas State had 16 penalties for 160 yards. Discipline may or may not be an issue.
No, I agree.
Like that's awful.
Well, what I couldn't figure out at the end of last year, and this season's going to tell me what was actually the deal or not, was how Texas State fell apart on the stretch run last year. Um, and I couldn't figure out if that was a TJ Finley problem, if it was a GJ Kinney problem, if it was, they other teams had figured out what they were running on offense and finally came and like started taking advantage of that. They had watched enough film that they had caught up. Now it makes me wonder, is this a systemic GJ Kinney problem and not just like, hey, we needed a better quarterback than TJ Finley?
Correct.
So you have the reigning Sun Belt Player of the Year. And, I know they kicked a field goal with 30 seconds to go to pull within 7, but the game finished within 7 points. Like it should have never gotten to this point. So again, Texas State's defense was a concern coming into this. I said I thought they had the most weapons of any offense in the Sun Belt. Guess what? You allowed 27 points in the second half to an FCS school. That might be a little reason for concern. And that's not hating. That's just me being like, that's reason for concern.
That's just the fact.
All right. So Texas State moves to 1-0 despite all of that drama. Lamar drops to 0-1. Let's transition to week 2 in the Sun Belt. We'll go ahead and make picks on these games if ESPN ever loads on my screen. That's not what I'm looking for.
I've got it on mine if you need it.
Yeah, go ahead and kick us off with the first game while I'm navigating ESPN's site from 2006.
A noon kickoff in Memphis on ESPNU between 0-1 Troy and 1-0 Memphis. Memphis is an 18.5 point favorite with an over/under of 57.5. Look, I'll start. Give me Troy plus 18.5. I think that spread is just absurd. I know Troy looked a little off against Nevada, and I know people are really high on Memphis, and that's fine. But 18.5 in a G5 versus G5 game is just kind of wild to me. So I'll take the Trojans plus 18.5.
No, I agree. The over/under is 57.5. I'm taking the over.
Okay.
I think Memphis can score with Seth Hennigan. I think Troy will put up enough points to make it to get us to that point. And the spread is just stupid wide. So I'm going to take the over of 57.5. I think both teams are going to be able to put up enough points. And I'm sort of hedging against Troy potentially getting blown out because as we saw last week, you take the under in like Coastal Carolina, Jacksonville State, and Coastal basically puts up the over by themselves.
For sure.
So I'm taking the over there. Let's see. I finally got ESPN's site to comply with me, so I'll go ahead and run through the rest of these. UTSA at 4:00 on ESPNU is taking on Texas State. The game is in San Marcos. Texas State is a 1-point favorite. Over under 63.5. Again, I'm taking the over. I think both of these teams can score.
Yeah.
I think this is going to be a real benchmark for Texas State. Because I honestly, I'm going to go ahead and say it again. Sorry if people take it as disrespectful. I don't believe in their defense. I don't think they can get enough stops on a regular enough basis for me to feel good about picking them in a game where the spread is 1 point at home.
If what you just said, if your pick was disrespectful, they're really not gonna like mine.
Oh no.
Give me the Roadrunner straight up. I really like what I saw out of them in against Kennesaw State, but I really like what Owen McCown was able to do. I think he's a really nice quarterback. Jeff Traylor, we know what he's done over at UTSA over the years. They're a really strong football program. A 1-point game at home that really means the UTSA is a 2-point favorite.
Mm-hmm.
So give me the Roadrunners.
All right. Okay. 4:30 on the CW network. Who knew they aired sports on the CW network? Between reruns of the Vampire Diaries and Smallville, we've got Marshall taking on Virginia Tech. It's in Blacksburg. Virginia Tech rallied a bit last week. I mean, I'm trying to give them a little bit of praise. And this game is so ugly because I don't believe in either one of these teams as far as I can throw them. But Virginia Tech is a 20.5-point favorite at home.
20.5. Oh my God.
I think I'm going to take Virginia Tech. I have seen that they can score. I don't know. This isn't Stony Brook. I don't think Virginia Tech is a good football program, but there's a real difference in taking a step up from Stony Brook to a P4 program. So I'm sorry, but I'm taking Virginia Tech.
As much as I agree that there's a step up, 20.5 is absurd. And this, to me, watching Virginia Tech play ODU over the last couple of years, this just feels like a game that Marshall's going to hang around. So give me Marshall plus 20.5.
Okay. One game we don't have to talk about too much here. James Madison's taking on Gardner Webb at home. James Madison's going to roll them worse than James Madison did to Charlotte. We talked about it during the James Madison preview episode. Their schedule's just so cake this year. Like
it really is.
It's kind of obnoxious how easy it is, but yeah, we expect them to roll there. The next game here, East Carolina is traveling to Norfolk to take on Old Dominion on the road. East Carolina is a 2.5-point road favorite. Over unders 55.5. I'm taking East Carolina. I think what we're going to find out throughout the season is that Old Dominion was not a great football team, and I think that we're going to find that South Carolina is the SEC equivalent of Old Dominion. So I think East Carolina is a better team than Old Dominion is. I think they'll be able to score more points. And it's a pretty tight spread. It's not like I'm saying they're going to blow them out, but I just think East Carolina wins by 4 points, and I think they beat Old Dominion.
It depends to me on which version of Grant Wilson shows up. As Isaiah Page had a really nice game against South Carolina. They're at home. Probably have some confidence after that performance in Columbia. I'm not doing this on the sole premise of disagreeing with you, Brian, but I'm gonna take ODU.
All right. Another 6:00 kick. ESPN Plus. South Alabama is traveling to Athens to take on the University of Ohio, not the Ohio State University, the University of Ohio, the Bobcats. South Alabama is a 1.5-point road favorite. Over under is 57.5. I'm going back to the well. I'm taking the over. I don't think either of these defenses are going to be able to stop the opposing offenses. I think Gio Lopez is going to be able to score enough points to keep it competitive, if not straight up win the game. And Ohio's running back Tyus ran for 203 yards on just 16 carries last week. And what do we know about South Alabama's defense? Not great.
They can't stop the run.
Right. So I will take over 57.5 in this one.
I'll agree with you there.
All right. 7:00 kick. Georgia Southern is traveling to Reno to take on the Nevada Wolfpack. Georgia Southern is a 1-point road favorite. Over-unders 58.5. This might be the last time I ever take Georgia Southern, but I'm taking them. Like, if they disappoint me here, they're dead to me. So if they can't win this game on the road, there's a real chance they start the season 1-4 because the games after this are South Carolina State and Ole Miss. So they have to have this game. I mean, they have to.
Yeah.
And believe me, I don't feel good about it at all.
God, because I'm not touching that over under.
No.
58.5. That's, oh man. God, give me the Eagles.
You're gonna close your eyes and hold your nose like you're taking cold medicine, but yeah.
Yep. Give me the Eagles.
All right. We've got a couple of 7:00 kicks. We can kind of merge these because we're running long as it is, but there's not a lot to talk about. So Coastal is facing off against William and Mary at 7:00 on ESPN Plus, and then Georgia State's taking on Chattanooga at 7 p.m. on ESPN Plus. We anticipate the Sun Belt teams to win both of those games. Yes. So how much is there really to talk about?
Correct.
Matt, your team here, Louisiana is traveling to Kennesaw, Georgia to take on the Owls of Kennesaw State. The spread is 15.5, over unders 47.5. I'm taking Louisiana minus 15.5. I understand what you were saying about, there were things in the Grambling game that maybe you didn't feel the best about. But man, at the end of the day, Kennesaw is still a call up, and they're still trying to get their feet underneath them. So give me Louisiana and the points.
This is a quintessential trap game for the Cajuns. And the reason that I say that is you're getting ready to go into a bye. You're coming off of a big win. And if you're Kennesaw State, you have to be on cloud 9 because your first game as an FBS member, you battled with UTSA the whole way through. A 28-16 final score. You come back home for your first home game as an FBS member. That place is going to be rocking on Saturday night. Granted, their stadium only holds 10,000 people.
Yep.
But that environment's going to be crazy. I think the Cajuns win, but 15.5 just really kind of makes me nervous. So I'm actually going to take Kennesaw on the plus 15.5.
Wow. I'm surprised. All right, another 7 p.m. ESPN Plus game. Tulsa is traveling to Jonesboro to take on the Arkansas State Red Wolves. Arkansas State is a 7.5-point home favorite, over under 65.5. Give me Arkansas State minus 7.5. I'm going to be totally honest. I don't know anything about Tulsa, but I think Arkansas State is a better team probably than Tulsa.
Agree. I would agree.
It all just depends on whether they're going to get enough stops to be able to keep you outside the number. Is I think all it comes down to. Another game here, 7:00 ESPN Plus once again. UAB is traveling to Monroe to take on the Warhawks. UAB is a 13-point road favorite. Over unders 53.5. Give me the Warhawks plus 13.
Oh, what?
Georgia Southern played UAB last year, and they with Trent Dilfer. They absolutely, in a season that Georgia Southern looks so bad in the back half, they absolutely smoked the Blazers, like smoked them. And I don't really believe in Trent Dilfer. I think as a coach, like I think it was a little bit of a hasty hire, bringing up a guy who has an NFL pedigree but was only a high school coach before this. I think it's too much of a jump too soon. And I think UL Monroe will try to just take time off the clock, and I think they're going to keep it within 2 touchdowns. I don't think they necessarily win, but I think they're going to play conservative enough and not get outside of what they want to do. So I'm calling for the upset, but really I'm just saying they keep it within 2 touchdowns, I think.
I'm going to take the under because I halfway agree with you. I think ULM is going to try to milk the clock and keep things as close as possible. So I don't think either of these teams are going to score more than 24 points. So I'm gonna take the under.
And I really wasn't impressed last year by the Blazers starter Jacob Zeno. I didn't really think he was all that great when I watched him play. Another game here, we don't really have to talk about this except Will Hall. Will Hall's life might be on the line. If Southern Miss loses to Southeast Louisiana at home, you mentioned this. It's gonna be tough for him to get out of the stadium in one piece. Let's just say that. We don't even really need to talk about it, but we both kind of feel the same way on that. All right, last game, 8:00 ACC Network, Saturday night. App State traveling to the other Death Valley to take on Clemson. Clemson is a 16.5 point home favorite. Over unders 53.5. Give me Clemson minus 16.5. I'm probably wrong. I'm sure App is probably going to play them within a field goal for no reason whatsoever. But you want to talk about a coach that's like fighting for his life and trying to stay above water? Dabo. People have been throwing. I don't like Dabo. I don't like him as a person. Like I just think it's a lot of like fake mega pastor church energy as a football coach, and he has just willingly gone against the tide for no reason of how college football's headed today. With that being said, like if they don't get up for this game after getting absolutely stomped by the number 1 team in the country last week, they're not going to get up the rest of the season. So this is the time for them to take their anger out, I think.
Yeah, you talked about Dabo being against the tide. If you don't adapt, all you're going to do is die. And I think Dabo's career is on its deathbed. App State is a team that they always play up for these games. They're always right in the thick of it. They beat A&M a couple years ago. They beat North Carolina. They beat South Carolina. Look at the times they've lost to North Carolina, how close it's been every single time they've played. I think Saturday night's no different. Give me App on the points.
All right. Well, that does it. We're wrapping up here. We went a little longer than we usually do, but we usually don't throughout the season have every single team playing each week.
Correct.
So we've got way more games to talk about than we normally do. Plus, when 2 Sunbelt teams play, we only we cover 1 game, but knock out 2 teams in the process. But we haven't gotten into conference play yet. Matt, do you want to let everybody know where they can find you on socials, and we'll go ahead and get out of here?
Yeah, you can find me on social media at Miguez Matt. Another big weekend of Sunbelt football. I will be on a different assignment than typical. I will actually be in Death Valley this weekend covering LSU versus Nicholls State. So that'll be fun. But as always, you can find great Sunbelt content and more at Miguez Matt.
Yeah, I just saw their running back towards ACL LSU.
Yeah, brutal.
That's tough. As always, you can email the show at warmweatherfans at gmail.com. You can follow us on X at warmweatherfans. You can follow me personally at Watch the Stone. Zeke, who is here in spirit but not in body, you can follow him at Zeke Palermo on X. Thanks everybody for joining us for another episode. We'll see you back here recapping week 2, talking about week 3 on Warm Weather Fans, the Sunbelt Podcast.